welcome to Taj Tell 'em. In today's episode, we're continuing our series through the Democratic candidates for president in 2020. And today we're covering Elizabeth Warren.
We're going to be talking about her life, her policies, and what we think about her candidacy.
Yeah, including our visit to her barnstorm.
Yes. Welcome to Taj Tell 'em for episode 4 on Elizabeth Warren. We're recording here from sunny Hollywood, California. And my name is Jack Chen. I'm here with my friend T.
Hey, what's up, guys?
And so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the next Democratic presidential candidate, which is Elizabeth Warren.
Ah, nice. So how'd you first hear about Elizabeth Warren?
I actually first heard about her during 2016 when she was, kind of talking on behalf of Bernie, and then later on she endorsed Hillary Clinton.
Similarly, I was listening to the Dan Carlin's podcast, Common Sense. And he's more of like a libertarian. And so, he was actually mentioning Elizabeth Warren as, someone who he wished could run for president in 2016.
The libertarian was saying this?
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting, because I think what it is he's very much against just corruption. And so I think he really appreciated, her stance against corruption.
I do sense when I went into her history and her policies, I do sense that she is very anti moneyed interest in the government.
No, very true. She's big on regulation and effective regulation. I think one of her claims to fame, which was the start of the Consumer Protections Bureau. I think that was started under the Obama presidency. She actually was the person to create it. Which is, I think that shows that's a great thing on her resume because she knows how to build a department from scratch. That has been, pretty successful.
And even though she wasn't named director, I believe she was named like vice president or something.
I think in the beginning she was acting director, but then I think when it came to getting her approved as, the formal director, you're right, there was some politics going on. And
it was the Republicans that didn't want her.
Exactly.
Because they knew that she was going to go against this money interest. And in order for that to go through, she actually took a step back and said, hey, yeah, appoint somebody else. And with overwhelming Democratic support for her to become director, though.
No, true. But, she made her mark on the department. She was key in the design of it, in the hiring of it. One thing that I'll really give her credit for is that she doesn't just have these like very beautiful idealistic ideas, but she has the shrewdness in order to execute on them. Like case in point, there was this, big decision that had to be made whether the department was going to be run by a committee of both Republicans and Democrats or one person. And she opted for one person because she was saying, hey, we got to build this right from the start, especially with the culture. And so as a result, she was able to staff it with people who really cared about the interests of the American people, who really were against corruption. And so even though the danger of putting one person in charge is once the administration changed, which it did, it runs the risk of then the new guy like really changing it. But to Elizabeth Warren's wisdom and foresight, because she just built it with this great culture of like fighting for the American people against moneyed interests. Like the new department.
It's hard to penetrate.
Oh yeah, it's hard to change. And also I think in the beginning it was shown to be so successful that it's actually very popular now, and so it's very hard to undo a department that's very successful. I think probably the case they're most well known for is they really punished Wells Fargo for opening up a bunch of fake credit cards and accounts on consumers. And so, they really caught them with the pants down. And so she's really good about catching like financial fraud, to the tune of like $30 billion that these companies literally stole from the American people. And so, that shows why.
And that line was great when she looked at the Wells Fargo CEO and said, at worst, you are complicit, and at best, you are incompetent.
Which is true.
Yeah, because hey, yeah, I know. Even though you are CEO and you don't know what's happening at the lowest level, but it's still your fucking job.
Yeah, it's like I build a website for you. You're like, T, it doesn't work. Oh,
I got a bunch of Russian bots in here, man.
It wasn't. I tried the best I could. I didn't do that on purpose. But.
Okay, so what did you find out about her?
So we can start with kind of her personal life.
Okay.
Like she grew up kind of middle class. Her own description, kind of more so lower middle class. I think like hanging on by their fingernails or something like that was a phrase she
Oklahoma,
used.
right?
Yep, in Oklahoma, in the middle of the country. She's 70. She's over 70 years old, so she grew up in a much different America at a time where women, they're a lot more like traditional gender norms, and so even though she was one of the most like successful debaters in her high school, just women during that time from that part of the country weren't expected to go to
I mean,
college.
she was born in 1949, so when she graduated high school, it was like 1967.
Yeah, no,
Right?
true. Yeah, and that's just the beginnings of like the 60s flower child kind of movement. So I think, maybe the beginnings of like women liberation was kind of like becoming more in vogue in society. But in Oklahoma, definitely not. To her, she even self-described to say like her expectations or the expectations placed on her were to become like a wife and a mother, and that's it.
Okay.
Oh, so she actually did, and she came from like like I said, a lower middle class background. So her parents didn't really have a lot of money. I think her dad was like a janitor. Her mom was a stay at home mom. She tells this very this story in the campaign trail that like her dad got laid off because of an injury, and her mom like tearfully was kind of squeezing into her best dress to go to an interview at Sears. And because she was able to get that job and be a working woman, she was able to kind of like support the family.
And keep their house.
Oh yeah, and keep their house. And so it's something where, I think the trajectory overall in her life is a story of kind of like women empowerment in a sense, in a very legitimate sense. Because what's interesting is she ended up going to, college, but she ended up dropping out at 19 because her high school sweetheart, her first husband, asked her to marry him.
And that's how she got her last name, right?
Oh yeah, Warren. And so, what's really sad is like, today if that was happening, like no self-respecting woman would, like interrupt her career like that, But I think just during her time, it's like, okay, this is what's expected to me, Like I think it shows that she, is someone who's conscientious for like the needs of I think her family and things like that, And so for she wanted to respect her parents' wishes, so she ended up getting married.
Yeah, it's that classic story of what I want to do and what society wants me to do, right?
Yeah, and the family. So in that way, I think as like coming from an Asian background, you and I, we kind of understand that a little more intimately because in some sense, the Asian culture is more traditional in that sense, where what the family wants kind of takes precedent over what the individual wants, versus what modern day Western culture is. It's more just individual, and so. She ended up marrying this guy. He moved around the country for his job, but she was able to convince him to, finish her college education. She ended up getting like a law degree. She ended up even becoming like a professor.
She went to Rutgers or something like that, right?
I think so. Yeah, not. She doesn't come from like a great academic background, just because it was so dependent on where they were living at the time. Her and her husband, because her husband was, the sole breadwinner.
No, but she was very accomplished. She got some really high degrees.
No, definitely. I mean, you think about it. For that time, for a woman to have like a law degree, like that's not common. And so, she ended up becoming a professor, which also was not common. And so,
and at Harvard too.
Not yet. In the beginning,
not
she was, I believe, a professor. I believe at a university in Texas. I want to say Houston. And so, but she ended up divorcing her husband, and she cites, she and her / her biographer, it cites that, it was this kind of like who her first husband thought he had married was, this kind of traditional gal that was just going to be stay at home and et cetera, et cetera. But, Elizabeth Warren, she's cut from a different cloth, like she has a gift that she, needed to share with the rest of the world, and so, a year later she remarried with her now current husband. And actually, she asked him to marry her. So.
Oh, what? Go, girl. Go, girl.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
You get it.
I don't know if she's the one that bought the ring and then went on one knee, but.
Oh, man. But no, they mean, hey. And when was that?
That was about like 1 year after her divorce. Gosh, I don't know.
Wow,
the
so
actual
I
year.
think that was in like the 70s. Because
I think so.
I think
I
they
wanna say.
divorced. That's very progressive.
Oh, yeah, very, very progressive. And I think it's because she, from firsthand experience, like learned the lessons of, what, I'm in control of my own life. Like as much as I want to respect the wishes of my family and the people in society, they may not, I mean, they have good intentions, but their understanding is very limited. And so I think, and this arc of kind of challenging conventional wisdom continues to carry through, because her real like claim to fame in the beginning of her career was her stance on the bankruptcy laws. I'm not sure if you're very familiar with that.
Not too familiar, but
So, long story short, it was like, she, and actually originally was Republican. So she
that's
had this
correct.
like strict dad mentality of like, oh, people who took care of bankruptcy, like, they're the welfare queens.
yeah, the scumbags who are just getting out of paying for all the lavish spendings that they did before.
Oh, yeah. It's like they wasted their money on Cadillacs and like nice clothes and eating out.
But the truth she found out was
No, it was actually, like a sickness in the family, a inability to pay medical bills. Like it was these things where, most people aren't rich, so some kind of big life-changing event like this, it's going to put your finances in a tailspin.
it goes back to that 75% of the people can't afford a $400 emergency right now.
No, very true. And especially people like of color, and I think, people who are like immigrants and things like that.
Or women.
Or women. So it's something where, these are the most vulnerable segments of our population, who not through no fault of their own, no kind of irresponsibility, just, life happening to them.
And also disaffected men,
Yeah, very true.
There are men who are good people who just got the worst, the short end of the stick.
Yeah, bad luck happens to everyone. And so it's something where she realized that, wait a minute, like, yeah, the story that I've been told is all wrong, and so she switched. But who didn't switch? Joe Biden. Back then, that motherfucker.
Jurassic Joe.
Oh, yeah. That guy was like trying to make bankruptcy harder. He was trying to recover more money for these creditors. He was on the wrong side of history there. And so, but.
Was that the first time?
Certainly not the last time. But and so it's a form of like almost like I don't know if poetic justice is the right term, but like at least serendipity that she is now going head to head with Biden again.
Yeah, I don't think she's been on the same debate stage as him yet, huh?
Not yet. I feel like it's been purposeful that they've been keeping the two separate because I think her campaign is so substantive that I think she's going to reveal the emptiness of his campaign.
I think he's going to reveal the emptiness of his campaign.
No, that's fair. I mean, that guy is having trouble just stringing words together at this point. So.
Now that guy is showing his age, really.
No, he is. Because like Elizabeth Warren isn't that much younger than him, but she is like a whip.
Articulate.
She's articulate. She's sharp, knowledgeable. Biden, he's just confused. Go to joe30330.com.
And I mean, during the debates, I don't want to bring it back to debates again, but like, there were times where they said, "Hey, time's up," and
and he's like, "Oh, and yeah, whatever," In
his mind, "Oh, Saved by the Bell, good."
No, very true, and I think, compared to, Warren, like she is so erudite that she can go on at length about, policy minutia. And, that's why I think, by far she is the most well-informed of any candidate, running right now.
And I think we went to Elizabeth Warren's barnstorm in LA last week, and her whole campaign model is she's got a plan for that.
And fair, and she does, and I think even the way she's running her campaign, I think shows her ability to be a good institution builder, because it was a very well-run like event. Like they're embracing modern day these technology in the form of like these apps, using like the big data to kind of like help aid in like, making sure that what resource she does have are just being properly allocated. And so, she is very meticulous about the details. And so, the only really knock on her is a knock of style, and it's not a knock of substance. She's the real deal.
And to add to the details, remember how when I signed up with with her group, I texted it. Remember what was texted back?
Oh no,
a picture of her dog.
Ah,
Bailey.
mm-hmm.
And he says, "Oh, if you got a picture of Bailey, blah, blah." I mean, who doesn't love a picture of their dog in their phone?
No, true, yeah. And she does have this kind of like folksy kind of quality, like this every woman, every man kind of qualities to it. I mean, sometimes I think it's she lays it on a little too thick, but her actual roots though, she doesn't come from privilege. Now I think she's doing pretty well for herself.
I mean, you're in Massachusetts, so
oh, yeah. I mean, her net worth is somewhere like between $4 to $11 million, so by no means is she's salt of the earth anymore. But I think she's definitely earned it being a practicing lawyer. Harvard professor.
Yes.
And so, I don't think we should punish people for their own success, especially if it's
I
self-made.
mean, hey, Bernie's a millionaire right now.
No, that's true. Yeah, from the book revenue. So it's something where, like, just because someone has money doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person or they're corrupt. I think it's just looking at what was the source of that money. But at any rate, I think the bankruptcy issue kind of propelled her forward into the national stage. She won the Senate seat that I believe
2012, I believe.
2012, I believe. I think it was Ted Kennedy's old seat. I think she beat like a very weak Republican that was holding it. And then, she began to enter into like the national conversation through an appearance on the Jon Stewart show.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is where I like her. She's very earnest. She was saying, she was saying that before she went on that show, she was literally like vomiting backstage because I just being so nervous. And I think, but when you watch her, performance on that show, she comes across as like, very earnest, very well-intentioned, very well-informed. She was talking about how when the U.S. Government was like, buying the stock of these auto companies to bail them out, the U.S. government got cheated. The U.S. government got 66 cents worth of stock for every $1 they put in. And so that's something where she pays attention to the details. She's not afraid of calling out the shortcomings of like the government. So she's not trying to like put positive spin on things. She's owning it, and so that kind of honesty and transparency, I think is really needed in the world.
And I mean, it's a rarity to have somebody who understands the financial aspects and the legal aspects of a situation. So reading into her her policies really and her Medium articles. Like, she knows what she's talking about. She's and also when we were at the Barnstorm, we were talking to a scientist who supported her, and he was just you could tell how much he really liked her.
Yeah, and that was something that we've been to two different political events together during the season. One was the Andrew Yang fundraiser, and the other being this Barnstorm by Elizabeth Warren. And there's a very stark difference between the type of people that attend each event. I'd say Andrew Yang is attracting a lot of political outsiders, a lot of like young men, a lot of people who, aren't really active in politics, but then are just very passionate and active on the internet. I think Andrew Yang has won the meme war.
Oh man, the memes are awesome, man.
But Elizabeth Warren, she seems to garner a lot of support from people who have a history of political activism. Like a lot of people we talked to at that Barnstorm, this wasn't their first rodeo. Like they've worked on political campaigns in the past.
And not just presidential campaigns. It sounded like they worked on local campaigns too.
No, very true. They were already familiar with the tools that they were providing in the form of like these apps, and so I think that's where in terms of her campaign, it's probably one of the best run. I also think that despite being kind of older, like being in her 70s, she understands the value of technology. Like the people working for her campaign were really emphasizing the importance of big data. Even the fact that she's making such a big early investment in grassroots organization building versus like media ad spend, I think that shows that she is looking to innovate and she's responding to data. Because they wouldn't make that big investment if it wasn't giving greater returns than traditional media buys.
Now, for those who don't know what a Barnstorm is, which we didn't even know what that was when we first went there, it was a grassroots movement to go canvassing. For those who don't know what canvassing is, it's for you to knock on doors and talk to people about politics. And if not to, and the way they ran it was like, hey, don't try to convince people. Just, talk to them and see what their concerns are. And then we can gather this information, and this way we can work with it. Now, we live in LA. And how many people were there about?
I would say easily maybe like 300.
300 people who live in LA were willing to knock on random strangers' doors to talk to them about politics. I mean, man, there's a level of dedication for you to want to do that.
Yeah, very true. And, this meeting was held in like a tent outdoors in like the sweltering heat that we've been experiencing. And so these people are dedicated. I mean, you even called out, like you were looking at a woman's notebook and she had written, dream big, fight hard. And so, she's really tapping into like the idealism that's in people's hearts. And so, I really feel like, yeah, she I think she's plugging into that same kind of desire for change that Sanders is tapping into.
Yeah.
But, she's just a slightly different form of it. We spoke about this in our earlier episode about the debates, but, she really represents not necessarily an overturning of our existing political system, but more so like an improvement upon it, like just by adding more regulation, more safeguards. And so I think this incremental approach, I think it speaks to more so, moderates who are like, hey, like the system isn't completely broken. It just needs to be improved.
Right. There are parts about her policies that I do have concerns about.
Let's hear 'em.
But before we go to that, what was the next thing? Are we going to policies right now?
Yeah, let's hear your policies.
Sounds
I
good.
mean, and she is a policy wonk. So
First of all, she of all the candidates, and this, I'm always looking at the markets. I'm looking at investing. I'm looking at the economy. That's a passion of mine. Politics is also a passion of mine. And you can, normally I don't speak with so much angst and excitement level, but when I'm with T, I get like that. And she, to her credit, back in 2006, 2007, she was one of the first ones who was saying, hey, there's something going on with the banking industry. We need to rein them in. And then 2008 happened. Nobody listened to her. Now she's talking about how there's going to be another economic crash. There's going to be an issue. The crazy thing is she's pointing at all the right problems. You got family and student debt issues. And right now we're at historically low interest rates. Right now, the federal fund rate is 2.5%. They just lowered it to 2.25%. That means for those people who don't understand federal fund rate, that affects every kind of loan that you have, including your credit card debt. So that means right now you're paying like 19% on your credit card debt. Wait until that federal fund rate goes up, then you're going to be paying 25% and 30%, and then you're going to be really squeezed. She's looking at that. She's looking at corporate debts. So people, what caused the 2008 financial crisis were these things called CDO, collateralized debt obligations. And the banking industry got in a lot of problem with that, although nobody went to jail because they're too big to jail. So now they changed the name and made it's called collateralized loan obligations.
Much better.
CLO, collateralized loser obligations. And basically those are corporate debts. So, and it used to be housing debt. Now it's corporate debt. So a lot of companies like WeWorks or Uber and, all these companies who are losing billions of dollars a year. And now they're running on a lot of debt. And they're using these debts and they're being sold to investors. And that is an issue because once the interest rate goes up, these companies are going to be squeezed too. We have a manufacturing recession, the trade war, inverted yield curve. That's something we'll cover on another episode. But I'm just flabbergasted. I said, wow, she really knows her stuff. She's pointing at all the right problems.
But does she have the right solutions?
Well, this is interesting. So she does have solutions for these. Household debt, she wants to raise the minimum wage, which could help with the income issue. $50,000, and I think you're going to elaborate on this later on, $50,000 of student debt cancellation. Lowering the rents through her housing program. Affordable childcare and tuition-free college. So that is all to help personal, family, and student finances. If you lower your cost, that's going to help you. You lower your rents. If they lower your lower your childcare costs, that's going to help you to pay off all these debts that you've accumulated. She wants to enforce and monitor more guidelines for corporate debt so that those CLOs do not get out of control, because that is the part about Wall Street. It gets out of control because there's so much greed. Then you got the manufacturing recession, and she wants to bring in kind of part of that whole Green New Deal, green tech manufacturing. We need to convert all these manufacturing plants to manufacture, clean energy. Instead of building cars, we should be building solar panels. Instead of getting coal, we should be building wind turbine. Like those are things that are going to help with the manufacturing recession. And she also wants to get rid of the debt ceiling for the government. Now, that is an issue that I don't agree with, but she is also pointing at that issue because there is a unsustainable amount of government debt right now.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a great summary of her platform. But I will say this: you've also kind of called attention to like the key like weakness in her platform, which is, how are you going to pay for all this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Because to your point, how she's going to pay for it is getting us like deeper and deeper in debt. Because she claims that this wealth tax that she's come up with, which is essentially 2% tax on every dollar. So she likens it in her folksy way, 2 pennies on every dollar that a millionaire has over $50 million.
Which is every year. Am I correct?
That's my understanding of it. It's a tax not on income but on wealth, on assets, and so. The United States already kind of has a wealth tax. It's called the estate tax, but it's only paid, when someone passes away. But, the rich people have found a way to kind of circumvent it, through these family trusts. I mean, even like the Getty Foundation that runs the Getty Museum, that's just a means to kind of, get away from paying this estate tax to Getty's heirs. And so that's kind of maybe my biggest concern about, her saying, oh, don't worry about it. The wealth tax will cover it. I'm like, well, the wealth tax, it's tricky because one, how do you assess the worth of wealth? Because the wealth isn't necessarily liquid, like money in a cash account. It could be like, this person has Ferragamo shoes. This person has a Picasso. This person has a Rolls Royce.
I mean, just very easily, they have 5 mansions.
There you go. So how do you value all these, property? And how, because you have to think about depreciation, et cetera. And also, like, it isn't like when I have like a Rolex watch, the government knows I have it. So like, how is the government going to find out I have this Rolex watch?
Right, right.
So I just
so you can get an approximation, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But I think it's just something where, the means in which rich people have shown the ability to shift around their wealth, like, well, I'm a little skeptical.
Let me just kind of put it this way. She makes it very easily 2 cents for every dollar over 50 million, right? There's 52 cents in $1. So that means if somebody stayed in America with all those assets, in 50 years, it would be gone.
Up until they get to 50 million, they stop paying it.
Right, correct. So anything above 50 million is going to be gone. So there is a huge incentive for these guys to get the fuck out of America.
Yeah, no, very true. I mean, when France tried to do like the really high income tax, I think 75% or something of the rich, even Gerard Depardieu, the beloved Frenchman, like
was the guy who also did a Depardieu on the plane, right?
No, but I mean, I think the feasibility, the concept behind the wealth tax, I think everyone can get behind. I think no one, like, how many private jets does one person really need to have, But once again, the feasibility, and I just feel like in the event that it's not feasible, then like, how are we going to pay for all this stuff, And I would hate to see what happened with Obamacare, where then the costs get pushed to people like you and me. Like I saw my healthcare costs, premiums go up by 300%. Because of Obamacare. And am I really the guy that should be paying for Obamacare? Like I'm not Jeff Bezos, like this is a Casio. This is not a Rolex, And so, this is something where it's like, hey, I paid for my own college,
Yeah.
I'm not some rich fat cat, so I think it's just something where like these giveaways, like they sound nice, but and it's great if Jeff Bezos can pay for it, but let's be realistic here.
So what's going to happen is you're going to end up having to borrow money for the federal government because, hey, how are you going to forgive $50,000 of student loan for everybody? And how are you going to pay reparations? She brought that up. She wants to do reparations. Now, I'm against the moral case of reparations. Not against. I'm for. I'm sorry, I messed that up. I'm for the case of the moral case for reparations. But I didn't own any slaves. My mom didn't own any slaves. You didn't own any slaves. Like, if you can make sure that only the descendant of slave owners will pay the reparations for the descendants of slaves, go for it. But I'm talking to the population of people who came to America after the fact.
No, very true. And some people argue though that we all benefited from it, but that's a very dubious argument.
We're in California. How do we benefit from it?
I mean, like I said, it's a very dubious argument, because you can claim. I would say that the vast majority of America's wealth came from wealth transfer from the first two world wars. Just to pay for all those wars, Europe, they borrowed heavily from the United States.
And so should they. So they should.
No, and to your point, yeah, maybe England has to pay some of these reparations.
Exactly. No, and then also, what about the descendants of the Union soldiers?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, it's one of the things where, it's just where are you going to stop litigating? Should we start paying reparations for Native Americans? Whose land we took? I mean, we kind of do that in the sense that they have like their casinos and things like that. Yeah. but I don't know. I mean, like should there be African American owned casinos? I don't know.
Yeah, it's just and it's just too complicated. So if you really want to bring that up. I just think you're gonna get muddied, and it's just not gonna be easy for you politically.
Yeah, because also I'll say this, if you look at the statistics, actually white progressives favor reparations at a much higher rate than African Americans do.
This is weird,
and so it's kind of weird, like who really is asking for these reparations, and so that's where I just feel like there's some degree of kind of like white guilt, virtue signaling going on. And so, I think would be better is just to focus on these issues like criminal justice reform. I think, some things like the targeting of like the redlining in like, historically African American neighborhoods. I think those are great, steps forward.
You definitely have to bring into attention the injustices that was happening.
Very true.
That were happening. And you correct those.
Very true.
You really correct those. And I think that's where Warren shines. She does know where the problems are. She knows the details and the intricacies of the problems. But we hate to do this because, in the Democratic Party, they keep talking about, why do people keep talking about how we are going to pay for it? Because I'm sorry, that is the fact of it. You have to figure out a way. Now, if she said, I'm gonna pull defense spending down to zero and pay for that, hey, we're all for it.
Maybe not to zero.
Okay, maybe not to zero, but yeah, I mean, I do enjoy my safety here, but
yeah, maybe a couple $100 billion, and then maybe we won't spend as much as 10 other top spending countries, combined.
Right.
Like I think we could bring it down a little bit, and I think that could pay for a lot.
Oh, tons. Because these motherfucking defense contractors, they just make a shitload of money. And off of our tax money, off of my kids' tax money in the future, because they're going to have to pay all those debt.
And they end up making our country less safe.
Yeah, that's true.
Like we would have been far safer if we never went to Iraq. We would have been far safer if we never tried to arm the Syrian
we
rebels.
should take the money from Halliburton.
Yeah, maybe that's a great idea. Yeah, maybe these defense contractors, maybe we claw that money back.
Yeah, I'm all for that. But I do have to give Elizabeth Warren credit for this, because she's not part of the whole modern monetary theory movement.
What do you mean?
So modern monetary theory was kind of popularized by AOC. She heard this from an economist, and she's like, okay, this is the best theory ever. But it's basically saying that the government can't default on their own loan because the government can print their own money. So if the U.S. Government can print their own money, they can pay off any loan because they just have to print it and pay it, which is just not.
How'd that work out for the Weimar Republic in Germany?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of debate basically like, hey, it's just inflation, so you just tax people to get that money back out. But I just don't think that's a wise thing to do. You just don't want to be printing money for no reason. And I do credit Elizabeth Warren for not jumping on that.
Yeah, it's because she's more thoughtful. I think, so this is somewhat conspiracy theory-esque. But I have a feeling that Elizabeth Warren, like she sees the flaws in her wealth tax. So I do think that's maybe more so of like the opening gambit, and I think she's trying to maybe rattle the rich people to maybe try to, okay, we're not going to get that wealth tax, but maybe we'll have like, peel back some of Trump's tax cuts, maybe make some other improvements in our tax code. I'm not, entirely sure what her long-term strategy is, but I have a sense that she understands the limitations of some of what she's putting forward. perfect example is like the healthcare thing. Like, there's no way we're going to get to Medicare for all. Despite whoever's in the White Office, in the Oval Office, there's always going to be some degree of compromise. So,
Right.
I think she's just more so. She's a smart gal, so I think she's just signaling to certain segments of the Democratic Party. The people who have student loan debt, the people who have issues with their health care. And then there's this populist angst against rich people, so she's also writing that too. So some of this, it's a little cynical.
You know what? There is another policy that she has about how to tax people, and for some reason I just can't remember right now. But I'm gonna look it up really quick. But okay.
Okay, yeah. I mean, and also I think, but going back to what this will pay for, though. I think I think her focus on universal childcare. I think it's important that she's raising that issue, because here in Los Angeles, most families, both parents work. It's just a fact of modern day life because it's so expensive. I know, Jack, you're fortunate enough that neither one of you work.
Well, we're working really hard right now.
So you won't necessarily benefit from universal childcare. No. But it's one of those things where, like, I mean, I'm kind of curious, as someone who is a parent but who will not benefit from universal childcare. I mean, what's your opinion on the policy?
Well, I mean, I think it's fine. I think that really helps people, and I'm okay with that, because I think any money spent on children and our future is just going to be great. What I have an issue with is the government controlling that. How good are they going to implement that? Yes, there's going to be a standard, and that's the standard, but it just gets bastardized when, you don't let the market really work it out itself. When you got these interests that are not aligned, so it's got to be put through in the way you were saying it, in a very thoughtful way for it to be effective. But I'm afraid that, with a 4-year presidency, or maybe if she goes 2 terms, you're going to have to do this. And this is a major, major issue. And, because think about our schools now. I mean, look at LA, hey, when I was growing up, and I had a big school too, I was 30 students to 1 teacher. Now it's like 40 students to 1 teacher. You can't do that with pre-K. You can't have in preschool. You can only have like 4 or 5 kids to 1 teacher. So how are you going to implement that? So I just don't know. I just question the effectiveness of it.
No, I agree. Yeah, it has a quality of like a pipe dream, I think, one idea I have is, like, if you want to forgive people's student loan debt, maybe you tie it to them, working at these universal daycare centers, because to have, that amount of college graduates, working there, it's almost like a domestic Peace Corps in that sense.
Yep.
I'm not sure if she's going to connect those dots, but I agree in terms of the quality of it. I mean, if you look at currently, like New York City, they did like the universal pre-K. One of the issues they're running into is the people who are working at these centers aren't very qualified, and they're underpaid, and that's why they're not very qualified. And so it's something where, how are you going to keep costs down? How are you going to get quality up? I mean, those are real challenges.
Yeah, those are real challenges. This is a big issue, and this is not the only big issue she's attacking. So that's why, back to your point on the debate, with the debate, was she has a lot of big issues, and you question how is she going to get everything passed through, and only if we have a supermajority, and they're still infighting within the Democratic Party too.
Oh, yeah, very true. And so one thing I'd be curious to hear as this primary season continues is, what are her priorities? Because, she has a plan for everything, but what is she pushing to the top of that list?
That's true. I don't know exactly what it is. She's got a lot of policies. She's got a plan for it. I just don't know what her plan to get that plan in place.
Oh, yeah, very true. And so that's where I think, I think she's been fielding criticisms about, like, she's kind of this academic in an ivory tower, and, some of her ideas may very well be very impractical. And so I think when it comes to general election, I'm sure that's going to be one line of criticism if she is in fact the nominee. The other being the Pocahontas issue, which we spoke about. And so those are kind of 2 big challenges for her. I think that's where someone who runs a very similar platform like Bernie Sanders has some advantages, in the sense that, he's selling it more so of this idea of like a political revolution. So that's kind of an empty vessel for whatever people want.
And with Sanders, he has a clear agenda: Medicare for all.
True, yeah.
That's his big agenda, and everybody's been with Pete Buttigieg, Medicare for all for everybody who wants it. Like, come on, everybody's biting off of him,
No, very true. Yeah, you're right. Sanders has done a much better job of like saying, "Hey, this is my signature issue, Medicare for all." And Warren, I appreciate that she's trying to address all these, put all these different fires. But I'm left thinking, what exactly is her priority?
Now, this is going to kind of segue into the next policy issue. Then I think I want to hear your take on it. But this, the other way she was going to pay for all these plans was the tax on corporations. So Amazon, remember? So for most people, you hear the news in the news all the time saying, "Hey, we have Amazon making $11 billion but paying zero income taxes," and everybody's outraged. Like, how can you make that much money but pay zero taxes? That doesn't make sense. This whole tax system is rigged. They're using too many tax loopholes. I'm sorry, they're not using tax loopholes. You have to understand, there's two systems of accounting. There's GAAP accounting, which generally accepted accounting principles, and which is done on an accrual basis. And there's tax accounting, which is what you file to the government. And tax accounting, of course, taxes are influenced by lobbyists and everything. But tax accounting, there are reasons for that. So that's why you have this discrepancy. So the company's stock prices is based on generally accepted accounting principles, and that's GAAP accounting. And so that's why when they report their earnings to their shareholders, they want to increase that amount as much as possible. And then when they report their income to the IRS, they want to lower that income as much as possible. So that's why you're getting this discrepancy. So she's saying that, hey, that's fine. If you don't want to pay any income taxes, that's fine, Amazon. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a 7% tax on this line on the tax form based on what you report to your shareholders. So if you report $11 billion and you report zero income taxes, that's fine. We're still going to tax you 7% on that $11 billion.
Which I think is a great idea, because
that is a very thoughtful idea.
Right, because it's aligning incentives. In one case, they're incentivized to balloon these figures. The other one, they're incentivized to decrease them. So it's like, hey, like you either want a good share price or you want low taxes. You can't have them both.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that segues into Warren wanting to break up big tech.
Yes. So this is also one of her big things. This is where she gets the criticism of using 20th century solutions for 21st century problems. And I say that because, maybe breaking up big companies in the 20th century made sense. But now that we're in like this global marketplace, I think the nature of technology is different than, other industries. I think it's not that all her ideas in this case are bad or all good. I think we got to slice this prosciutto a little thinner. And so, for example, I'm actually for breaking up, say, parts of Amazon. Because, Amazon has Amazon Basics. So say you shop for diapers, when you put in that search for diapers, one of the top results, Amazon Basic diapers.
And also I know people who sell on Amazon and, they sell on Amazon, but they don't want to, because once Amazon sees that you're doing well, they're going to be asking for more money. That's also an unfair advantage that Amazon has.
Yeah, very true. Because they control both the marketplace and they're also someone selling on that marketplace. And so they have access to all that consumer data. They have access to what's selling well. It's not hard to also do figuring out people's profit margins, And so, to your point, they can either raise rates on people who are doing well or compete with them, but really put their thumb on the scale. And so, that's bad for the consumer. It's bad for small businesses who are selling on Amazon. And so I'm all for her breaking that part out. Mm-hmm. Where I think it becomes more problematic is something like, say, Google. I think maybe she's showing her age, I don't know what, but she doesn't quite understand how, when a case, say, comes from Maps, like trying to separate Waze from Google Maps, as a principle, yes, competition is good, but at the same time, when it comes to map makers, Waze was originally an Israeli company. And so if other, tech companies from around the world aren't getting broken up and they can, benefit from acquiring their rivals and rivals technology, then pretty soon we have the lead in the information technology. We can lose that lead.
And keep in mind, Waze only got much better on Google because of all the data Google has.
Exactly. Yeah, there is a real benefit to the
Synergy.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Lots of synergy there.
Exactly. And and from the part of the consumer, like, guess what? When I search for like score of the Laker game, I like it how Google shows me the score of the Laker game.
It pops up right at the top, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you're like, oh no, that's not fair to ESPN, you have to now click through to ESPN. It's like, hey, as a consumer, now you're making my life harder.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think there needs to be some limits to this kind of break up big tech talk.
Like you said, nobody's using Bing now.
Exactly. Yeah. No one likes the second best search engine, like, consumers always want the best of everything. And so, and the whole reason for competition is to get the best.
I mean, it speaks to our generation. When I need a toothbrush, I go, what is the best toothbrush in the world?
Oh, yeah, very true. And so it's something where it's like, I think it's rather than think, oh, all competition is always good and whatever, think like, okay, what is the best case, scenario for the consumer?
And also, we are more sophisticated consumers than than previous generations. Previous generations don't take into account a lot of stuff that we do.
What do you mean?
No, I mean, we look at the financial aspect, the social aspect of it. We look at what the material's made out of, like, because we have so much more information on our fingertips. It used to be you walk into a store and you saw 5 products in front of you, and then you get to compare it over there. But now you go to the store, you look at it, then you go online and you search for it, and you figure out which one's the best, which one suits your need, like that kind of stuff. And also with programs, like, hey, I'm gonna ask you what is the best video software program. I'm not gonna go for the lowest cost software program that's not gonna deliver the things that I need.
Oh, yeah, very true. So technology has this natural kind of competition within it in terms of quality, because a lot of it's being created as we speak. So I think it's something where I think it's well intentioned, her desire to break up big tech, but I don't think it's very thoughtful. Also, I think companies like Facebook, like, they're intermingling WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook so much that at this point it's going to be very difficult to disentangle them.
And also, to your point, is we're not in a domestic situation. We're not in a global situation. We're not competing against ourselves. We're competing against the WeChat and the Alibabas of China. We're competing with Weibo. I'm trying to think of an European company that's but yeah, I understand why, but like, we need to be more thoughtful about breaking up our biggest industries.
Yeah, no, true. And I think it's something where you can case in point TikTok is like, gaining popularity. I think they've gained more market share than even, say, I think, don't quote me on this, maybe Instagram. But it's something where that's a Chinese owned company.
Well, definitely more than Snapchat.
More than Snapchat, yeah, definitely more than Snapchat. And so it's something where that's a Chinese owned company. And so, and they're not playing with the same restrictions that, say, like a Facebook or Instagram.
They got the full support of the government over there.
Yeah, exactly. If anything, government's helping support them. And so it's just like, we can't be like, well, China, that's not very fair. But it's this thing where, hey, like, that's the game that's being played. We got to help our own domestic companies and industries.
Yeah. I mean, and if you think about the tech companies, they've done a lot for workforce standards. Hey, when did you ever see a pool table at your work?
No, very true. Yeah, I work in the tech industry, so there's like a keg on tap at some of these places. I was playing ping pong,
kombucha, all you want.
Oh, yeah, barbecue for lunch. I mean, no, it's great. Yeah. So
I mean, work from home, like, that's unheard of from old industries. Google changed that.
Yeah, no, very true. And so it's something where it's like, let's kind of, be a little more thoughtful in terms of demonizing these big companies. Well, I will say this though, when it comes to like Facebook, Instagram, etc., these information platforms, I think the right tack is to regulate them, because I think if you let them go unregulated, then they begin to impinge on free speech. I think what happened to Alex Jones is terrible.
And Steven Crowder.
Yeah, because it's not like I'm a big Alex Jones fan or anything like that, but it's like, hey, even if I don't agree with what he has to say, he has a right to say it.
Yeah, show your Alex Jones tattoo, your InfoWars tattoo. Come on, man.
I've actually never seen an episode of that show.
No, I haven't either. Yeah,
I have no interest to. But if other people have an interest to, go for it. You know what I mean? Like, is this something where I don't think the answer is in like silencing voices in this conversation, and I think that's where big companies like Facebook and like Google, I think that's the danger of their size. And I think, but rather than break them up, I think we just need to put regulation on them.
So here's the thing with Warren. She makes a very good, clear choice about how to break up Amazon. And that's a very specific situation. You can really see that. But when you're talking about all these other tech companies, it just seems a little too much of a, she's using a big hammer, like a sledgehammer for this problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where if you have a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail.
Right.
I mean, I would hope, just knowing her character, that she's shown a willingness to learn, a willingness to admit when she's wrong. Perfect example is the whole bankruptcy issue, and so that's where despite my disagreement with her stance on breaking up big tech, I trust that if just looking at past performance, past behavior, she will learn the error of her ways and make adjustments along the way.
Okay. So, how do you like? So kind of in conclusion, what's your assessment of Warren? Do you think she would do well going against Trump?
So here's the thing, with Warren, she's actually, full disclosure, she's my second favorite candidate in this race. And it's because, one, she is just by far the most fluent. She's the most thoughtful in her policies. They have their issues, and that's why I prefer Andrew Yang's The Simplicity of the Universal Basic Income. But that said, her real weakness is in style. I hate the fact that we live in this world, but at the end of the day, the presidency is a bit of a popularity contest. And she has shown an inability to go toe-to-toe with Trump. I think the Pocahontas thing is just, it's going to haunt her.
That's going to come back, and she's going to be a butt of a joke at that time. And the memes are going to go crazy on her, too.
Hey, she's going to lose the 2020 meme war.
Yeah, she is. She is. I mean, she's got the grassroots, but, we're in LA, so we can see that. I don't know how she will do in the red states.
Yeah, just because I just feel like just the nature of the conversation, it just benefits these sound bites. It benefits cult of personality. And I think that's not her strong suit. Her strong suit is giving very thoughtful, reasoned explanations. And maybe it's cynicism about the American people. It's not that the American people are stupid, but it says that they're just too busy and they're too apathetic to really spend the time to invest and really learn about these issues. I think, case in point, if that wasn't true, how the hell did Donald Trump win?
Yeah. I mean, they're just so busy working. They're so busy putting food on the table. They don't have time to think about all this.
Exactly. And all they resort to is just these very kind of crude labels of Democrat, Republican, and communist, whatever, capitalist, whatever. And so I think it's something where, out of my cynicism, that's what concerns me if Warren did win the nomination. And that's why, to some degree, I would say Sanders is probably a more viable candidate in the 2020 general election, just because from an issue of style, he can go against Trump because his messaging is a lot more simple, a lot more emotional. I think, in terms of personality, I think he's a lot more difficult to attack, for Trump to attack. And I think Sanders shows an ability to kind of get down into the trenches and fight.
And Sanders has been to a Fox News town hall.
Yeah, true. Yeah, he's not afraid.
And he was well received by the people there.
Yeah, because he knows how to speak to the heart. He has that charisma of speaking to their actual felt needs. And I think as much as Elizabeth Warren is trying to be more folksy, I think she is who she is. She is an intellectual, and that's why I like her.
And she's genuine.
That's she's very genuine. But at the end of the day, I think people they want to hear it from the gut.
But also with her, it's unfortunately she's only speaking to one side. I just don't think she really speaks to the Republican side. The people, I just don't see how a libertarian will want to vote for her after seeing all these policies. I don't see how a Republican would want to vote for her after seeing all these policies. They're just going to say, you're just giving the country away.
No, true. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Taj Tell. If you like what you heard, go ahead and just smash that subscribe button.
or give us a like, a thumbs up, anything to help, and make sure you turn on the notifications.
5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
I don't know what the ratings are. A lot of or Google.